Brahmanath. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Swastha. In the previous class, we discussed about the pneumonia and the common cold. Pneumonia is generally caused by the various bacteria, such as we discussed, such as your Diplococcus pneumonia, Streptococcus pneumonia, Haemophilus influenza, and also Mycoplasma. Further, pneumonia is also caused by various viruses also. Whereas the common cold is generally caused by the viruses. About 200 species of viruses are there who can spread the common cold, and the virus which is responsible for the common cold is generally the rhinovirus. That is why the common cold is also called the rhinitis. Then whereas some small bacterium can also cause the common cold. Then after that we discussed the mode of infection, the symptoms, treatments, and also various prevention and control. There are various similarity in the symptoms of the pneumonia and common cold. So what is the main difference? Main difference is the pneumonia is a breathing disorder in which the lungs is being directly attacked by the pathogen. Whereas in the case of the common cold, the pathogens attack the nasal epithelium part of the part area, or we can say the upper part of the respiratory tract. In the common cold, it does not attack to the lungs, but in the pneumonia, it directly attacks to the lungs. Whereas the pneumonia is the severe form. Whereas all the previous the prevention and control and almost we can say the prevention control are almost similar in both the cases. Okay, but only the main difference was in the pneumonia the lungs is get attacked by the pathogens, whereas in the common cold the lungs are not attacked. Okay, so today we will discuss two more diseases. One is your amoebiasis, other one is your ringworm. Okay. Amoebiasis is also known as your amoebic dysentery. Okay, means dysentery means we can simply relate that it is something related to intestine, or we can say the digestive system. Okay, so amoebiasis it is a disease which is caused by a protozoan called Entamoeba histolytica. It is a disease caused by protozoan Entamoeba histolytica. Entamoeba histolytica. Okay, this is the scientific name, we will underline this. So it is a disease caused by the protozoan called the Entamoeba histolytica. This pathogen is monogenetic in nature, means it requires only one host to complete its life cycle, and the host is your human. The pathogen is monogenetic. It requires only one host to complete its life cycle, that is the human. Okay. So the pathogen is monogenetic in nature, means it requires only one host to complete its life cycle, that is your primary host is your human. Next point, In the amoebiasis, it affects the lower part of the small intestine and the colon region of the large intestine. Okay, it affects the lower part of the small intestine, part of the small intestine and the large intestine, basically the colon region. Okay, means it affects basically, as it is dysentery means it is something related to the digestive system. So we can say that it affects the lower part of the small intestine and the colon region of the large intestine. Okay. Next, what is the infective stage in the case of the amoebiasis? As we discussed, in the case of the filariasis, the infective stage was microfilaria. In the case of the malaria, the infective stage is your sporozoites. Similarly, the infective stage in the case of the amoebiasis is your tetranucleated cyst. The infected stage in the case of amoebiasis is the tetranucleated cyst. Okay, tetranucleated cyst means this is something like a cyst having 4 nucleus around. Okay, so it is also called the tetranucleated cyst. From each tetranucleated cyst, 4 to 8 entamoeba releases. From each tetranucleated cyst, around 4 to 8 entamoeba releases. Okay. Next point. This cyst secretes cytolysin. Okay, this cyst secretes cytolysin. Okay, which helps in breaking the wall of the small intestine. Which helps to break the wall of the small intestine. There is a life cycle in the. So the cyst secretes cytolysin, an enzyme called cytolysin, which helps to break the wall of the small intestine. Okay, small intestine as well as the large intestine, or you can simply write the intestine. Okay, simply write the intestine. As it affects both the large intestine and small intestine, you can simply write the intestine. Next, the life cycle in the case of the amoebiasis is much bigger, but it is not much required. You just remember one thing: as the cyst bursts, 4 to 8 entamoeba releases. Okay, it enters into an healthy person. Okay, by as it is a foodborne diseases, the cyst enters into the healthy person by the help of the contaminated food and water. Then in the human, it another time forms the cyst burst, and the 4 to 8 the entamoeba releases, and more number of cysts are formed, and that cyst comes out of the human body through the fecal matter of the human, by which another time it is ready to get spreaded to another healthy person, by the various vectors such as flies, which will spread the cyst from the stool of the infected person to make contaminated the food, water, etc. So we can say the cyst comes out of the human through the fecal matter, or we can say through the feces. You can write through the feces or the fecal matter. Okay, by which it is another time ready to be get spreaded by the various vectors. The total life cycle is not required in the case here. So this is some points. It is a disease caused by the protozoans called the Entamoeba histolytica. The pathogen is monogenetic, as it requires only one host, that is the human. Okay. Next point, it affects the lower part of the small intestine and the colon region of the large intestine. Further, the infected stage in the case of the amoebiasis is your tetranucleated cyst. Okay. This could be your 1 mark objective. What is the infected stage in the case of amoebiasis? Then answer will be tetranucleated cyst. From each tetranucleated cyst, around 4 to 8 entomoeba releases. Then the cyst secretes the cytolysine, which helps in breaking the wall of the small intestine as well as the large intestine. So simply we can write it can helps in breaking the wall of the intestine. Okay. Further, the cyst comes out from the human body through the fecal matter or the feces. Okay. Next come to the symptoms. First symptoms, the cytolysine, which is enzyme secreted by the cyst, it breaks the mucosal lining of the intestine, okay, by which it can enter. We can say the cytolysine breaks the mucosal lining of the intestine. Okay. The cytolysine, which is secreted by the cyst, it helps in breaking the wall of the intestine by breaking the mucosal lining of the intestine. Next, it can create ulcer. Okay. It can create ulcer or ulceration, we can also say. Blood and mucus are found in the patient's stool. Okay, means in the while defecation, in the case of the patient, the stool consists of blood and the mucus. So we can write blood and mucus is found on the patient stool. Okay. Further, there are also common symptoms are there such as your nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, etc. Nausea, as we know, nausea is a tendency to vomit, then the vomiting, then your abdominal pain. Okay, so these are your various symptoms. So first symptoms is your cytolysine breaks the mucosal lining of the intestine. It can create ulcer. Then the blood and mucus are found in the stool, on the patient stool. Then your some common symptoms are your nausea, vomiting, and the abdominal pain. Next come to your mode of infection. Obviously, the main mode of infection is taking in of the infected stage, means the tetranucleated cyst through the contaminated food and water. Taking in of tetranucleated cyst, okay, which is the infected stage in the, or we can write through the cyst, through the contaminated food and water. As it is a foodborne disease, contaminated food and water. Okay, as we know, it is the, we can say, it is the mode of infection is the taking in of tetranucleated cyst through the contaminated food and water. Okay. Then next come to your diagnosis. Okay. In the diagnosis, we can check by whether we can say the presence of the tetranucleated cyst on the patient stool, or we can say smear of the stool. Presence, we can check by presence of tetranucleated cyst on the smear of stool. Okay, means while diagnosed we take a smear of the stool in which if the tetranucleated cyst is present, then we can confirm that the patient is suffering from the amoebiasis. Or we can also check by the presence of the white stone shaped charcoal leaden crystal. Okay, presence of white stone shaped charcoal leaden crystal on the smear of stool. Okay, charcoal leaden means it happens from by the we can say the damage of the eosinophil of the blood. Okay. Discuss the diagnosis means if the presence of the tetranucleated cyst on the smear of the stool or the presence of the white stone shaped charcoal leaden crystal, okay, on the smear of the stool. So you can also add presence of tetranucleated cyst, or we can write the trophozoites, okay, or the trophozoites which is the feeding stage, or the trophozoites which is the feeding stage in the case of the Entamoeba histolytica. As we are not going into the detail of the life cycle, so you just remember that the trophozoite is the feeding stage of the amoebiasis, but mostly it will happen if the presence of the tetranucleated cyst is present, which is the infected stage of the amoebiasis. So till now we discussed the symptoms, mode of infection and the diagnosis. In the mode of infection we discussed that the cytolysine breaks the mucosal lining of the intestine generally. Then it can create ulcer, blood and mucus can be found on the patient's stool, and 3 common symptoms, that is your nausea, vomiting and the abdominal pain. And the mode of infection mainly is the taking in of the tetranucleated cyst through the contaminated food and water, okay, as it is a foodborne disease. And lastly we discussed diagnosis. It is we can diagnose by taking the smear of the patient's stool, okay, and check whether the tetranucleated cyst, which is the infected stage of the amoebiasis, is present or not, or the trophozoite, which is another stage, or we can say the feeding stage of trophozoite, feeding stage of the amoebiasis, is present or not. Or simply we can check the presence of white stone shaped the charcoal leaden crystal on the smear of the stool. Charcoal leaden means it happens due to the damage of the eosinophil. Okay, please note down. Now come to your various treatment in the case of the amoebiasis. You can take various antibiotics in the case of the amoebiasis, such as your the terramycin, erythromycin and the metronidazole, okay, which is the most effective one. It is the most effective one. Okay. So there are 3 basically antibiotics are available, such as your terramycin, erythromycin, metronidazole, etc. and more also antibiotics are there, but the most effective one is your metronidazole. Okay. Next, the prevention and control. As we know, as I always say that the prevention is better than the cure, there is some prevention that could be taken. Means the proper sanitization must be done, okay, is required, or we can say proper sanitation is required. Okay, so that the disease could not spread from an, we can say, from an infected person to the healthy person. Okay, if we will properly sanitize all the things. Okay, then we can, secondly we can write the proper washing of the fruits and vegetables, so that the disease cannot spread easily to another healthy person. So we can, another prevention you can write proper washing of fruits and vegetables. Okay. If we will properly wash the fruit and vegetable before cooking, the fruits, the vegetables should be washed properly. Before eating the fruits, it should be cleaned properly, it should be washed properly. Then there are few chances that the disease can be spread. Lastly, the proper coverage of the food from the various vectors, such as the common vector is your flies. Third one is your proper coverage of the food from the vectors like flies. Okay, as we know, if that fly is carrying the disease, or we can say the cyst, can easily spread through the contaminated food and water. So it is highly required that the food or the fruits or vegetables that are present, we can simply cover, or we can say the proper coverage of the food and fruits and the vegetables are required, so that it can be stayed away from the various vectors like flies. Okay, so now we discuss various treatments and the prevention and control. In the treatment, the antibiotics which are supposed to be taken during the amoebiasis treatment is your terramycin, erythromycin, and is your last one is your metronidazole, which is the most effective one. And during the prevention and control, proper sanitization is required, highly required. Proper washing of the fruits and vegetable is also highly required, and also the proper coverage of the food is required. Why the proper coverage of the food is required? So that the foods or the fruits and vegetable should be kept away from the vectors such as fly, which plays the main role spreading this disease. Okay, please note down the treatment and the prevention and control. Now come to your another disease, that is your ringworms. Ringworms, first point, ringworms are your small microscopic fungi called the dermatophyte. Ringworms are small microscopic fungi called dermatophyte. Okay, as you should all be familiar with the ringworms, it causes superficial skin infection. Okay, it causes superficial skin infection. Okay, next point, it is commonly found in the case of the children, okay, but it is also found in the case of the adult, but it is commonly found in the case of the children, but oftenly also it can found in the case of the adult. It is commonly found in the case of the children, but also it can be found in the case of the adult. In the case of the adult. Okay. And the last point, as we know, it is the small microscopic fungi called dermatophyte. It is found in the skin, nails and the hair, like we can say a mushroom growing on the bark of the tree. It is found on the skin, nails, hairs, such as mushroom growing on the bark of the tree. Okay, so these are some introduction points, such as first point is your ringworms, or we can say these are the small microscopic fungi called the dermatophyte. Second point is your it causes a superficial skin infection. For 1 mark objective you can also write it causes superficial skin infection called tinea. Okay, means it could be your 1 mark objective that the ringworms causes superficial skin infection. Means superficial means it causes on the overall the upper layer of the skin, it does not deeply penetrate inside the skin. Okay, so that is why it is called the superficial skin infection called the tinea. This could come as your 1 mark objective. Then it is commonly found in the case of the children, but also in some cases it is also found in the case of the adult. Next and the last point, as it is said that the ringworms are the small microscopic fungi found on the called the dermatophyte, or we can say the dermis region. So that is why it is found in the nail region, the hair region, okay, or we can say the skin region. Such as how the structure is like, such as a mushroom is growing on the bark of the tree. Its structure is such as like that. Okay, so these are some introduction point of the ringworms. Please note down. Next come to your types of the ringworms and it's showing the various symptoms. Okay, so basically there are 8 types of the ringworms are there, or we can say the as we said the tinea types of ringworms are the tinea. First one is the tinea barbi. Okay, it is the ringworm of the bearded area of the face and neck. Okay, means the region of the face, the bearded area, the type of the ringworm is your tinea barbi. Okay, and what is the symptoms? Basically the swellings are apparent and the mark clustering, means a coating like is present on the, or we can say swelling happens on this bearded region of the face and the neck. Next, the tinea capitis, it happens on the scalp region of the head region. Okay, the type of ringworm is which effect is your tinea capitis, the region which it affect is your scalp region. The third one is your tinea corporis. Okay, it is the it happens on the general skin of the body, and it is your important for the 1 mark, it is important. Okay, you should remember that is the tinea corporis which occurs at the round spot of the classic ringworms. Okay, it is happens such as a dot like manner. Okay, means a ring, such as a ring like structure having a superficial skin infection, and it is the tinea corporis which happens on the general skin of the body, and the structure is somehow the round spot or it is also said the classic ringworms. Next, fourth one is your tinea cruris. Okay, it is present on the groin area. Groin area means the region between the two thighs. Okay, and how is it the symptoms? It is like the reddish brown like symptoms. Then fifth one is your tinea facie. It always happens on the region of the face, but except the beard region. Okay, the beard region where we discussed in the first one, the tinea barbi. So the tinea facie always happens on the face region, but except the beard region. Okay, how it forms? Like red scaly patches are being formed. Next, the sixth one is your tinea manus. It happens on the palm and the space between the fingers. Okay, it happens between the palm or the space between the fingers, and the type of the tinea is your ringworm is your tinea manus. Seventh, one of the most important one is your tinea pedis. Okay, it is the type of the ringworm or the infection found in the athletics feet, or we can say the feet web, which is found. Some skin infection is found as they wear for some more time the shoe, the socks, by which the sweating get infected, and it's caused the a type of ringworm that causes the disease is called a tinea pedis. It is the important one for 1 mark objective in the case of the athletics feet. You should all are present, but you should remember two very importantly. One is your tinea corporis, which happens on the general skin of the body, round spot, or which is also known as the classic ringworm, and the tinea pedis, which occurred in the case of the causes in the infection in the case of the athletics feet web. And the last one is your tinea unguium, which occurs or which causes infection in the fingernails and the toenails. Okay, so these are your various types of ringworm. There are 8 types of ringworm we discussed. First one is your tinea barbi. Okay, which occurs on the beard and the face and neck, and the symptoms here swelling and the mark crusting. Then the tinea capitis, which depends on the scalp region. Important one, tinea corporis, which depends on the general skin of the body and occurs as a round spots, or it is also known as the classic ringworm. Then is your tinea cruris, which happens on the causes infection in the groin area, which is the region between the thigh. Okay. Then it occurs as a reddish brown like structure. And the tinea facie, it occurs on the face region but except the beard region. Okay. And the red scaly patches are being found. Then the sixth one is your tinea minus, which is found on the palms and the space between the fingers. And the seventh one is your most important, that is tinea pedis, which is found the infection in the case of the athlete's feet web. And last one is your tinea unguium, which is found in the case of the fingernails and in the case of toenails. Okay, please note down. Discuss the various treatment and the control in the case of the ringworm. For the treatment, you can use topical treatment or the systemic treatment. Systemic treatment means simply you can take the oral medication. Topical treatment means that the treatment should be applied on the infected area. Such as so many creams are used, such as your antifungal cream, clotrimazole, lotrimine, miconazole, okay, ketoconazole and the naftifine. Okay, these are your topical treatment, means these are applied on the directly on the infected area. But some systemic treatment are also present, such as some oral medication are also present, by which you can take the medicine orally, by which the ringworm can be cured. Next, what are the various control? As we know, it is the communicable disease, so that is why simply the first, the major and the common control is your patient should be kept in the isolation, so that the pathogen could not be spread from one person to the another person. Lastly, the substances which the infected person is being using should be properly sterilized. Okay, so that the contaminated substances which the infected person is being using should not be spreading, or we can say the disease should not spread from the contaminated by the help of the contaminated substances. So that if it is properly sterilized, then the diseases cannot be spread. Okay, so simply we now discuss the various treatment, such as your topical treatment, such as your antifungal cream, clotrimazole, lotrimine, miconazole, then the ketoconazole, last one is your naftifine. Whereas the systemic treatment is your oral medication, and various controls are your patient should be kept in the isolation, and the proper sterilization should be done of the substances which are used by the infected person. Okay, so today we discussed the amoebiasis. In the amoebiasis we discussed it is caused by the protozoan called the Amoebia histolytica. The infected the infected stage is your tetranucleated cyst. It basically affects the lower part of the small intestine and the colon region of the large intestine. Then further we discuss various treatments, the mode of infection, the symptoms, the treatments and the prevention and control. And also now we discuss the ringworm, which is the microscopic fungi called the dermatophyte, and also we discuss the 8 type of the symptoms of the type of ringworm and the symptoms. And lastly we discuss the treatment and the control. Okay, so that's all for today. We will meet in our next class. Thank you.